Yes, hello, welcome. We are back. It's Awful Wins Football. It's lower league lingo. It's been a minute since we've been on for this, but the leagues are set. Everybody knows what's happening now. Well, to be fair, I've got a lot to say about this. I'm pretty sure these two do too. So we'll see you on the other side of this, and we will get into it. Still love that song. Okie dokie. Well, listen, lovely to have you all with us. John is back, supping there on his brew, looking like he is stuck in space somewhere. How are you doing, John?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. It's been a couple of weeks since I've been on. So, evening all, evening Andy. All good here. Thank you, Barry.
Excellent. And fresh from what is a busy week for Mr. Gareth, and it's been a busy weekend as well for the partying and joy. How are you doing, Gareth?
I don't think my feet have touched the ground. My voice has not yet recovered um, from Sunday's Wembley antics. But what a day! But yeah, back now thinking ahead to next season. This season is done and dusted, and yeah, looking ahead, and there's plenty to talk about from our perspective at least. And I know John has got plenty to say as well, because when
Yes.
hasn't he?
Well, very true. Well, indeed, we're going to go straight into it. So basically, we've got a big plan today. We know what it is we want to talk about. We want to talk about tiers 1 to 6, the changes that have come in, teams coming up and teams coming down. But I just want to have a big chat about why it is that we've got teams dropping down, not wanting to stay in divisions, not wanting promotion. All of that's the important crux of it. But I'm giving John no more than 5 minutes. And it sounds like this is basically, I mean, when you go to the supermarket or to your local sort of post office and there's the little ad board, it sounds like it's going to be a bit like this. I've got no idea exactly how it's going to go. You've heard of like, kill, marry, avoid, all that sort of stuff. It sounds like this is going to be in a job, out of a job, not quite sure. So, John, over to you. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Thank you, Barry. I'm not going to look at the time because it's just going to put me off. But one league that we didn't quite cover at the end of last season, and Barry did say I can shout it out, because the Tier 5 West Midlands finished quite late because they started late. We never actually got to announce on this show that Kiddie Harriers did actually win that league. So we followed them all the way through the season, but we never actually finished the final week. So I just thought we'd give them a bit of a shout out and congratulate them for winning the double as well. So they won the county cup and the league as well. So they're now in the National League, so we'll be able to cover those a bit more. Thank you very much, Barry. I love that. Should have made it red and white, but I'll go with it. Thank you very much. But it's great. It's great. There we go. Love it. Look, I just wanted to chat a little bit about the amount of stories that are going on across the Midlands in regards to management movement. So players aren't moving around just yet because they don't know what managers they're going to be actually playing for. And I think that's a real big talking point across the Midlands. We get messages throughout the whole day, throughout the whole week, throughout the past couple of months. Who's going to go where? Because I don't want to apply and do a trial there if that manager's going there, this, that, and the other. So it's a big talking point of mine throughout my week. So I just wanted to kind of say where we're at the moment, mainly across the Midlands, but it does have knock-on effects as well. So just bear with me on this one. So Burnley, as we know, their manager got sacked a few months ago, Rebecca Saviuk. So Burnley is currently vacant. Why should that matter? Well, there are other Tier 3 North vacancies out there, or manager departures who may end up actually at Burnley. So I'm just going to name a few other things that's going on in Tier 3 North. Stoke parted ways with their manager, Marie Hurrihan. So she's obviously vacant, and that spot is vacant as well. Sporting Council manager Andy Mulligan, after such a successful spell of time there, especially last season, he kept them up in Tier 3. Andy Mulligan has resigned, so Calcer are still haven't got a manager. Well, at least they haven't announced a new manager yet. And Andy Mulligan, his stocks have never been higher. He got them promoted. He got them to 22, 23 points last season, 1 point behind Albion, I think, and he's now resigned. So he's obviously, he may be looking for a job, he may not be. He's open. He has says that he's happy to have a couple of years away, unless if the right job becomes available. Well, what could be the right job? Maybe it's one of those teams that I just mentioned. Maybe not. Stourbridge manager A. Clements has announced that he was going to leave towards the end of last season. He's been announced at Reddish Borough. So newly promoted Reddish Borough, who've just gone into Tier 5. Aid has joined Dave Healy there. And the Stourbridge new manager has been announced, Meg Bailey, former player, a current under-16s manager at Stourbridge. Stourbridge through and through. She's won a couple of trophies there this season. Also a first-team coach at Kidderminster Harriers this season as well. So she knows her stuff, and this is her first proper appointment in women's football. Rugby Borough, Lee Birch has signed a 3-year deal at a Tier 3 side. That's something interesting right there. 3 years as a manager in women's football. Absolutely fantastic. Halifax manager Rob Mitchell took a U-turn. So Halifax was vacant, not anymore. He's took his old job back. Is that because it's been retrieved into Tier 3? I guess maybe not. We'll see. Go on,
Can I just jump in quickly there? Thing with Rob Mitchell as well is he is now the full-time overseeing the whole women's pathway at Halifax. So he's not just the first-team coach, although that is a big part of his role. He now oversees the whole pathway. So there is a change to his job role as well, which I wonder if that was kind of part of the package that was able to keep him there.
Absolutely, yeah. Moving on to assistant managers. And it's not so bad, but all of these teams need assistant managers. And there's some people out there that are happy to be assistant managers or coaches, like I say, Barry. But Leafield Athletic, figure this one out, because it's got a knock-on effect. Leafield Athletic had a fantastic season. Their assistant managers left. Where's he going? Is he going to one of those vacancies? Could be. You know, does he deserve a promotion? Absolutely. So let's keep our eye open for that one. Sutton Coldfield in Tier 4, they've recruited their new manager, former WBA coach, Harry Rowe. So there's a few move arounds there. And then there's some things just to bear in mind. So things that's not necessarily being confirmed just yet. Cheltenham assistant manager, Mike Harris. So he's confirmed that he's left Cheltenham. A very well-established Tier 3 manager now. He's done a hell of a lot, lives around the Midlands. Will he be coming back up into the Midlands? Possibly. Wolves. Another fallout there this summer. There was a fallout last summer. You know, is it going to be time for Dan McNamara to move on? Will he be the one that goes to Stoke, to Burnley? He's going to be having his eyes open, isn't he? Then does that open up someone to go to Wolves? I can see Gareth enjoying his cup of tea, but I'm only halfway through. Give me 2 seconds. We mentioned Marie Murrayhan, and I'm glad that Barry's muted. We mentioned Marie Murrayhan earlier. She was based down in London. So is there any vacancies down south? Absolutely. Plymouth Argyle currently has James Bradley in charge, but he was only announced to be in charge until the end of the season when Ryan Perkins left, a good few years ago. So is she going to move to Stoke, move to London, then move it to Plymouth? Maybe. I'm just shouting these things out, guys. This is what we talk about. And let's not forget Southampton FC women. They parted ways mutually with Remy Allen. Remy Allen has got links with Midland teams. Could she take over a Wolves, Burnley, Stoke? Don't laugh, guys. This is what I talk about day in, day out. And if you're part of my group chats and WhatsApp groups, this is all we talk about. Man, it's a big job. Can Remy Allen do it? Absolutely. And finally, why does this matter? Why do you ask? Well, this matters. TNS, the Welsh League. You know, TNS, they're only half an hour away from if you live in Shropshire in the Midlands, or an hour away if you live in the West Midlands. They have signed Jodie Williams, formerly of Everton, formerly of Wolves, formerly of Worcester. However, she can't do all that by herself. She will be looking for a right-hand person. TNS. I'll leave it there. It's been five minutes. I think it's been about 5 minutes.
Yes, that's why I'm muted. To be honest, I'm really disappointed you didn't start talking about the physios, strength and conditioning coaches. I feel like
conditioning coach has been announced at Kidderminster Harriers, Dion McGee.
If we are talking about assistant managers and physios, well, Wythenshawe FC are looking for both an assistant manager and a physio. So if you fancy it, and you know somebody, especially physios because they're important, in our Instagram bio, there's a link to apply.
Brilliant.
There's no part of me that would have thought the first 7 or 8 minutes of this show was going to basically be a bring and buy sale. But there we go. Jim White, eat your heart out. Who needs transfer deadline day? That's what we're going to do. Get you on for transfer deadline day. And you can just sit there and talk about all the comings and goings on the last one.
That would be a 24-hour live stream. That just John talking his way through full time in the squads.
Well, he literally would. So, for Abingdon, it is. Right, let's get on with it because we've got lots of things that we really want to get through. It's nice that we started with the joke, to be fair. Maybe we should have ended with that. Because I've got to be honest with you, boys, I'm not really very happy at the moment. I feel shortchanged, I think would be what I would say here, because the thing that we love about British football, I think, is the pyramid and the way that it works. The fact that the best team, the one that wins the league, goes up into the league above and gets the chance to ply their trade and have the opportunity to compete and see what they're doing. You take it all the way back to the olden days when AFC Wimbledon now, but Wimbledon, when they moved themselves all the way up through the tiers. And I find it remarkable. We're looking at what has been released today in terms of the top 6 tiers. Now, WSL have obviously been fine. They've kept the same formation they always do. They've sent Crystal Palace down to the WSL2. London City Lionesses have come up. And that's really nice. I like the fact there's a new team coming into the division that hasn't been seen before. And it'll be really interesting to see how they get on. But aside from that, Crystal Palace are then the only side that have been relegated because the WSL2 is not going to relegate anybody. Sheffield United have been given a reprieve. They've been given a reprieve simply due to the fact that Blackburn Rovers just took their ball and said, we don't want to play anymore. We're going to go somewhere else. We want to drop down. And they've just been dropped happily into Tier 4, which seems, again, remarkable to me because they only need 2 more seasons and they could potentially end up right back where they are here. So it ruins it for me. Obviously, Ipswich and Nottingham Forest have come up, which is no problem at all. But then you go into Tier 3. You're looking at your north and your south. Halifax, reprieved. Billericay Town, reprieved. Everything that's happened in the WSL2 is now affecting the WNL. So the top tier of the WNL, nobody's been relegated. So it's the same teams, with the exception of Bournemouth and Bedford coming up, and Loughborough Light and the Middlesbrough in the north. Then you start looking at Tier 4. Blackburn Rovers just get slid in nicely into the Division 1 North. Doncaster Rover Bells, they're not going anywhere. After all of that, us thinking that they're out of the WNL, little reprieve given to them. Now, what I find almost hilarious about this is that we joked about it as a group. I sat there and I spoke to you all and I said they go into the relegation waiting room. And I said we likened it to when you're on death row in America, and we all laughed and giggled about it. But I'll tell you what, there'd be some really happy people, wouldn't there, right now? Because the amount of people that have just got away with it is absolutely unreal. Stourbridge and MK Dons are the only 2 teams to be relegated into Tier 4. Portishead Town, another one in the southwest, they've been given a reprieve as well. It gets just as bad when you move into 5 and 6. But for now, just concentrating on the top. Blackburn, like I said, just drop out of it. Stourbridge have dropped into Tier 4 through relegation. But there's lots of teams out there. Just read about Barnsley today and the fact that they put a statement out saying, we don't even want to go into the WNL. We don't want to be there anymore. And I've got to ask the question, is this on the clubs or is this on the FA/governing bodies? Because Barnsley, I think, made an interesting point, which was the men's academy can play on a 4G pitch, but that's apparently not acceptable in the WNL. Now, you two are going to know this better than I because you are, well, within short, obviously, are one of the sides that are going to be popping up into the Division 1 North. And so, therefore, we'll be expecting a bit from them. And, of course, Kidderminster Harriers as well doing the same thing. So you guys will be getting the information. I'm obviously still stuck back at Tier 5. But is that the case? Are they asking for a particular type of stadium that's going to require a ridiculous amount of money to go in there? Because, yes, you don't really want to see teams make a loss, but equally, as much as you don't want to see teams make a loss, it's a negligible loss. When you compare that to your academy sides, when you compare it to your community work, everything that you're doing, it's not a huge one. I think it's really disrespectful, the whole discourse that's going on around women's football at the moment, and the fact that we have got a bunch of people in charge of football clubs, women's football clubs, that are not giving them the opportunity to play competitive football the way it's supposed to be played. The fact that Wolves were not going to go up if they beat Nottingham Forest for the title. They're just going to straight up say, no, we don't want it. What's the point? What's the point? So, John, you've had your chat. Let's get Gareth over for a minute, give you a little break. What are you thinking, mate? Because honestly, this really it's wound me up a little bit, because we've spent a whole year covering these divisions, and it almost feels like, well, what was the point? Because it's pretty much as you were.
Yeah. I think the point about artificial pitches is a weak argument from Barnsley. You can still play on artificial pitches. They just need to meet a certain standard and meet the ground grading criteria, which involve things like you're not able to see the pitch from outside, and various things like that. So you can still use an artificial pitch. I know Liverpool Feds do themselves in the National League, and there will be other clubs that do as well, that kind of play on those artificial pitches. So I just think that Barnes' argument was that they were operating at a loss, and it just feels like it's such a negligible size of the losses that Barnsley Football Club run at, and it just feels like it's this easy gesture that people can make. We can't afford this, so we're gonna get rid of it. And I don't know specifically what Barnsley's situation is. Yeah, Craig saying there in the comments that Durham have a 4G pitch. Yeah, they play at the university, at Durham University, and it just has to be a good 4G pitch that meets ground grading. And sometimes you have to do work to achieve that, especially at tier 3. But yeah, these things happen. And I just think that it feels like it's an easy thing, because actually maybe it's a bit awkward. Maybe there's a lot of kind of hours dedicated to being able to do the admin and things for the league. And, I've definitely noticed that within the last week or so, that the information I'm having to get ready in order to get promoted into the National League, that there's a lot there. They've got standards, and you have to evidence that you meet those standards in order to play in the league. And it's a lot of work. I had a meeting at the club, and it took us 4 hours to go through a lot of things, like not all to do with the National League, but we sat down and we discussed next season for about 4 hours. And I don't know if it's just the case that actually what sometimes clubs want is they realise that we're losing money here. The kind of novelty almost of it has worn off. We realise there's a lot of time and energy that we need to sink into this, and so we're going to pull the plug. And it kind of makes it I think it makes it easier at the moment, given that Blackburn have made that decision to drop down. It kind of made it easy for Barnsley almost, because there's almost no repercussions, because Blackburn take their spot, and we carry on into next year, and it's a 12-team league. All the leagues have 12 teams. It's not as if there's a gap anywhere, and we crack on as if nothing's happened. And I wonder if in a few months' time, by Christmas, are we even thinking about this, or are we just considering Doncaster Rovers Bells as a National League side as they are again? Are we considering Blackburn as a National League side? I think there are lots of questions. I think it was a kind of crazy week for us, because we knew that Blackburn weren't going to go into tier 3, because if you withdraw from the pyramid, you can only re-enter at the highest point 2 levels below where you were previously. So tier 4 was the highest point they could go in at. So we were kind of thinking, well, are they going to come into our league? If they do, then how are they going to work that? You know, are they going to give Doncaster a reprieve? Are they going to want the reprieve? Will it end up being filed? Are they going to want the reprieve? You know, are Halifax going to get relegated, or are they going to get a reprieve? Like, there was a lot of kind of questions, and I think we were looking forward to playing Barnsley. You know, that they're a big club. They played games last year at Oakwell. And we were kind of thinking, you know, this is a fantastic opportunity for us. We'd played at Highbury against Fleetwood the last game of last season, and it was a great experience. It was a great day, and you know, we were kind of excited about that as being a prospect, and now that's obviously not going to happen.
Yeah.
I also think I don't know what Blackburn's squad is going to look like next season. I think it will be a real shame if they were just to win the league and go up.
Is it not also, though, like, we're not just talking about this season, are we? We're talking about Blackburn have done it this year, but Reading did it the year before. They just completely just pulled the rug out from people. And this just doesn't feel like something you should be able to do. I mean, you look into tier 5, for example, you know, the teams have gone down from there as well. You mentioned Fylde, they've gone down into tier 5. But when you start looking at the North East, nobody went down into the North East Regional Football League. Nobody went down there, just Ossett United, just pulled in, given an opportunity to move in for that one. Nobody went down into it. Solihull Moors did go down. Lincoln City did go down. Ashford Town and London Seaward, who are now Atletico London, by the way. They've gone through another little rebrand, obviously thinking that London Seaward just sounded a little bit too Napoleonic, I think. So deciding to make it sound a little bit more like their Real Madrid in that respect. But then you go to the Southwest, nobody went into the Southwest Premier either. Nobody was relegated there. So then when you start looking, and it's when you get to tier 6, that's when you start seeing all of these massive changes and effects and ripples that it has. Because, again, you go into the Northeast Regional Division 1, 4 teams have been promoted into there, nobody relegated into it. So it's just, I'm not suggesting really that I just want to see loads of teams relegated. You know, this isn't some sort of it's not some sort of sadism wanting to see these teams getting punished. But the point is, if you finish bottom of your league, you're supposed to go down into the next league because you're just not ready for it. Sheffield United were just not ready for it. And when you start looking at some of these teams that have been reprieved, you know, Halifax, I think, are quite lucky, really, to be sat there realising that they are going to get a bit of a reprieve. But Doncaster Rovers Bells weren't that great either. And is it really the right thing for them to have to still be there at the same level? Are teams really going to want to go there? Are they going to relish the challenge? I don't know. John, I've got to throw it over to you on this one. It's the same question. Like, does it annoy you? Where are you sort of standing in all this? Because these clubs, I feel are just, you can't just pull the rug out from under people. It's not about money at this level for these players. These players are still playing for the pride of the game and for wanting to do well. What does it take? Like, Blackburn were whinging about, oh, we gave them Ewood Park and then nobody came. But I didn't see anything advertised about Ewood Park. It's just like, we're going to put it there and we'll just assume people are going to come up. And that's not how it works. You look at Arsenal women, they muller everybody when it comes to advertising. They throw it out there, and that's why they've got an average attendance of 29,000 this year. So it's absolutely possible to use your top stadium, your main stadium, and get people in. But it's about the marketing as well. And if you can't be bothered to put the effort into that, why are your fans going to be bothered to come and see you?
I'm a big believer in the marketing side of things, and that's what I speak about a hell of a lot on social media. It's very rare that you hear me talk about tactics, and we should have played this person instead of this person. You know, marketing's a big thing of mine, and what I have learned a lot of is you rely heavily on volunteers and people who do just do things for free or even just for a very small amount. And some clubs at this level just haven't got that amount of people around who can do that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not defending these clubs because they should be working harder to encourage these volunteers. But you might just have literally 1 or 2 people looking after every men's section, every boys section, every academy section, every girls, women's, etc. And they're struggling. So I think when you start looking at the criteria of clubs, and you start looking at like the grounds and all this kind of stuff, I think when you get to tier 3, you have to put a program together as well, and that could just be an online one. But even so, put in a program together each week for every home game. It all adds up with time, and a lot of these people just haven't got the time. So I think there's a lot of things that do go in behind the scenes where clubs just can't cope. But ultimately, as a club, you should be able to cope. You should be able to reach out to students or parents of players or fans who can jump into support. Does it annoy me? You says Barry, absolutely, because I think the more I see, the more it gets diluted and people talk about it less. If there's no Blackburn or Blackburn or Hull City that happened earlier a few weeks ago, all these announcements are kind of diluted the fact of what's happened with Barnsley today. So if Barnsley had happened 3 or 4 days ago when it wasn't announced, probably not many people talk about Barnsley because it's one of those, it's happening at Barnsley now. I think it's happening far too much that it's kind of, the novelty is wearing off until it gets to a point where it's happened too much, and then there will be a change in the criteria. So very, very disappointed, especially after we have covered everything and we get so excited about who gets promoted, who gets relegated, and it gets to a point where, does the pyramid even matter? They just have a word to the chairman at the start of every summer and say, look, which league do you want to be in? And it's kind of like that.
It's exactly like that. Exactly like that. It's like it's like a plaything, and you just the whim of the people that are in charge. And I don't know. I'm really. It's actually really annoying me. Like it's, when you get an itch that you just can't scratch. It's like that at the moment. I can't reach it, and it's really annoying me. And I can't think really how they're going to do the future of women's football at the moment. I feel like they need to almost put it in there that you look at the WSL and the WSL2. There's no problems with that. Like, it's there. They've now got the funding. They've got television deals. They're doing all those sorts of things. Is it just factual, Gareth, that the WNL isn't really fit for purpose insofar as they're trying to do something that is professional, but not all of the players involved, and I don't mean the players as in the actual women running around on their legs, the players as in the teams of this, players within the WNL, they're not all professional. They're not all at that level. They're not all at equal starting point. So as a result, there's going to be some that can manage it and keep going without too much of a problem. But then you've got others like Hull City, like their chairman caused an absolute drama over there in tier 3. Are they going to be the next ones that end up having a problem? Is it that? Is there just there's too much of a disparity amongst the teams in the WNL that some of them are almost being cut adrift?
Yes. But also, I don't think that's necessarily the fault of the WNL. I think we're just we're at kind of this tipping point, really, I think, where investments needed in clubs now. You can't necessarily running you can't necessarily kind of run these clubs as amateur clubs anymore. I think what we're seeing is we're looking, now that the WSL2, like Craig says, is going to be full-time, I think we're going to start to see more and more clubs at tier 3, like Craig says, they're become semi-pro, if not pro. Burnley have gone professional this year. I think we're going to start to see a lot of teams training 3-4 times a week instead of twice. The National League do have, this is kind of part of their minimum standards, is the amount of time you should have on the training pitch, or contact time they call it. So not necessarily training, but it may be a tactic session, takes up an hour of that. And that is more in tier 3 than it is in tier 4. So yeah, I think the right thing to do is to try and professionalize the league, but the support has to be there in order to help clubs do that. And when we went to these kind of part of the discussions around the old kind of framework they had when they were going to put PGA teams into the league and B teams, things like that, one of those things they wanted to know is what actually is the financial implication of this. And, some clubs said that if we go from 12 to 14 teams, that's an extra 4 games a year that we need to pay for. Referee fees, travel costs for 2 more games. They could be long coaches, potential overnight costs if you're looking at kind of tier 3 potentially. So I think it definitely is something that's considered. I think the WNL are trying to kind of look for more revenue. I think it would be great if potentially a sponsor came on board. So instead of just being the FA Women's National League, it was the whoever National League. And then that was some way of getting some money into clubs. I think that we're going to see more and more money going into the top 2 divisions now. It would be nice for some of that to trickle down. There is the effort to do that now with prize money for the National League Cup and National League Plate, I believe, as well. So there are some funding opportunities there. The National League have a pot of money available for grants for clubs to be able to do things. The FA have a pot of money available for clubs to be able to tap into if they need to make any adjustments to their ground. So if they don't meet the ground grading and need some money to fix it, you can apply for some money to be able to do that. You may need to match a certain amount. So I think if you're applying for, however much money, you will need to contribute something towards it, which I guess could be a stumbling block for some clubs, but that there is support there. Is there enough support? I don't know. I think everyone struggles for money, don't they? Everyone's, scrabbling around for sponsors. Everyone's looking around for, players to be sponsored, matches to be sponsored, shirts to be sponsored. We're seeing more and more women's teams having their own specific front of shirt sponsor to try and bring some money in that way. So I think that's always going to be a problem, regardless of where you are in the pyramid. I think it's tricky, and there are going to be teams that aren't ready to play at that level, which is why you need the relegation, and it's why you need there to be jeopardy. We want people in these leagues that are prepared to be able to invest. On the other hand, we also want teams to be able to be in the league based on footballing merit. And have teams who deserve to be in the league, I say it before. I think it's fantastic that we can have clubs in tiers 3 and 4 who don't necessarily have the backing of big financial powers. Calsa Rugby, for example, Loughborough Lightning competing against people like Burnley, West Brom, Stoke. I don't know how well they are linked to the parent club, so to speak, but the fact that people can be in there and can be competing is really exciting, and that should be kind of championed and things as well, and should be that kind of route.
So,
but at the same time, cash is king, isn't it? So.
Yeah, of course it is. You said they should professionalise. John, do you think it's just time? Do you think it's just a case of there's more eyes on the product right now, so therefore there's more scrutiny? In the grand scheme of things, maybe this isn't something that's not regularly seen within women's football, because we have seen teams drop out. We've seen it this season whilst we've been talking about the leagues. We've seen lower down teams dropping out of their league. Is it partially just that, do you think? They just need a little bit of time. And one of the things the Barnsley chairman said was the money doesn't trickle down from the top. So, Gareth, they're talking about the money. Is there a bit of that as well? Is it just that people were hoping there was going to be a lot more money lower down? It hasn't arrived yet. And so therefore they just want to push it back until that money does start to trickle in there a bit more. So really they're just sort of trying to delay it a little bit. Like, what do you think it is with that?
I think possibly it's all to do with that, along with obviously with what happened with the Lionesses. I think a lot of people expected the boom to be there below the top 2 leagues as well. Lots of stuff there. I think it's very just touching on what Gareth said as well. There's that saying is that they're like, if you're old enough, you're good enough. Even if you're a poor team and you're still good enough on the field, you should still be rewarded for that. And I do think of it, I do think of the players where, they might be part of a smaller club, but it's like frowned upon because as the club as a whole just can't afford to be in that league. I think that's just something that comes to mind when Gareth was talking earlier. When there's going to be a restructure, and there will be one, won't there? Obviously, the proposed to 16 team league in the WSL 1, 16 team in WSL 2, you might think then that it might start balancing out. So the top 32 teams will obviously get stronger, and that's something to bear in mind. But then the next set of teams, maybe they will start leveling out, so they won't actually be in a league that they can't afford. Because it does seem that like it is that way at the moment, where you are in leagues that it's just out of your price range, and it's a massive shame, because I'm a big believer in, if you've got the right people, it doesn't matter how much money you've got. If you've got the right people there, you can generate money. You can bring in the right people who are happy to play for a cheaper wage than some of the others, and you can still have success on the field. You mentioned Calcer there, Gareth, absolutely right. That the manager generated a lot of money himself to keep that team up last year, and they're going to potentially struggle this year with a different manager. So yeah, lots to obviously think about, and it's just very disappointing that I think it's always happened. I think the exposure's there more now, and I think the exposure's definitely catching up with the governing bodies, and it's been that way, I think, since we started following women's football with Man United back in 2018-19. I think we used to champion quite a lot for Man United back then, and obviously standards are getting better in the WSL. But as we're highlighting national leagues and regional leagues, who are also volunteers themselves, by the way, we are highlighting a lot of mistakes, or a lot of things that could potentially make the game better, but it's going to take potentially years to do.
No, absolutely. And to be fair, just so that everybody's aware, when I was talking about the WNL and saying they're not fit for purpose, I wasn't having a go at the WNL. I'm just saying, is there a disparity between the ambitions of the league themselves and the ambitions of some of the teams that are within it? I'm not for 1 second trying to suggest that the volunteer people at the WNL are not doing their job properly. That's not what.
One thing I will say as well is, if you go back 10 years, when there was more and more attention being shone on the WSL when it was originally WSL 1 and WSL 2, we saw clubs drop out. We saw Yeovil drop out. We saw Notts County drop out. We saw Donny Bells slide down the pyramid. So I think it's happened at both levels. It's happened at the WSL with clubs opting to, drop out, not be able to compete financially just when the money goes up. We're seeing it currently with the WSL 2. Now there's more requirements there with Reading last year. Reading, I think, is an anomaly and difficult to compare to Blackburn. I think that with Reading, they had a massive ownership problem. Like, they had several winding up orders, unpaid wages, unpaid bills, and it was just easier for their owner, who is now gone, thankfully, to get rid of it. So hopefully, with the new owners, we'll see Reading start to climb the pyramid again. But we're seeing it now with Championship sides, and a bit with some of those WNL sides as well, now saying we can't compete at this level, which is fine. But I guess there's ways and means of doing that. And if you can't afford to put the money in, then I don't know, would we rather Barnsley pull out now and say we can't do this, we can't justify this, we can't find the spend for this? Or would we rather them kind of do it and they end up stripping everything right back, having a season where they don't invest anything, there's no kind of real time or effort, they become kind of the whipping boys of the league, or they pull out midway through the season and everyone that fought hard to get those 3 points now loses them, and that causes disruption there. I think in an ideal world it wouldn't happen at all, but I think if a team is going to drop out, now is the time to do that, rather than once everything is going to...
You say that, but honestly, what I want them to do is to stand by what they said they were going to do. The amount of money, like we say, in the grand scheme of their entire budget that it would take to run a football club at these levels, is minuscule for some of these teams. And you talk about a team like Barnsley, I mean, yes, all right, they're making losses, but that just shows us you can't run a football club full stop. That's got nothing to do with your women's team. So why are the women having to pay the penance for the fact that the men's team can't get the money in either? Like that's a management problem. So why are the women sitting there having to bear the brunt of the fact that that can't happen? What I want them to do is to go, well, this is what we said we were going to do, and so we're going to stick with it. We're going to stick with you. That's fine. It's ridiculous. Like, you should not be. It's like you don't have kids if you're not ready to have kids. Like, you can't bring them into the world, especially not nowadays. That there's far too much money needs to be spent. So you have to be sure, because you can't just turn around and go, oh, I don't want a kid anymore. Really, like, so no adoption exists and all that sort of stuff. We've gone down a massive rabbit hole once again that I didn't think I'd end up down. But you get the idea. Like, these things shouldn't just be disposable. Oh, we're bored of that now. We're just going to give that up. Like, that's the whole point. If you do want to do that, you give it up for adoption. Sell it. Is there not the opportunity to put it to people that do want to invest, so that these girls and women that are playing the game don't have to find themselves constantly almost being lied to and not being given the chance to perform? I've got one last question, and it goes to both of you. And it's just one that I'm intrigued about, and this could potentially cause offence for some teams, and I apologise to you for this. But I think if you search your heart and your soul, as Brian Adams compels you to do, you will realise that it's a fair point. Is part of the drama when it comes to trying to get people into the stadiums and get more excitement around the lower league, is part of it to do with the fact that there are a hell of a lot of teams, especially when you get to tier 4, 5, and 6, who some people couldn't point to on a map even if they tried to. So, in a little example, right, we'll just throw these leagues back up again for tier 4, right? Now, in my mind, if you take a look just at tier 4, I'll give you tier 3 as it is, because it's pretty much stacked up in those. But I would argue, if you look at tier 4 in the Division 1 North, I reckon you're looking at 5 or 6 teams in each league until you get to the Southwest that are actually sort of big names. And I admit you're absolutely talking about big names through men's football, not necessarily through women's football. But if you're looking at increasing it, you're going to want some of these bigger names. So if you're trying to market a game, Blackburn Rovers, Huddersfield, Leeds, Stockport, and York are probably the teams that you would look at there and go, yeah, we've heard of them. They're quite a big side. When you get to the Division 1 Midlands, Barnsley, regardless whether or not it's the real one, you recognise the name. Kidderminster, certainly I would recognise them through my time in the lower league adventures with Stevenage. Lincoln, Northampton, Notts County, and Peterborough. When you get to the southeast, Cambridge United, Fulham, Luton, Milton Keynes Dons, Norwich, QPR. You get to the southwest, really, you're looking at Bristol Rovers and Swindon. Other than that, like, who are the teams? So if you're sitting there and trying to market it, is there an argument that, I mean, especially in the southwest there, are people really can they get excitement about that? You know, if you're Bristol Rovers and you're trying to come and play against Maidenhead United, like, some people won't even know was that where Theresa May was, unless they know that. Like, they've not got a clue who some of these clubs are. And you get into tier 5, it's just as bad, if not worse, because you're talking about 1 or 2 teams that really are well known. Now, I say worse again, it's not. I love women's football and I love where it is now. But what I'm saying is we're trying to grow it. And ultimately, if you're trying to grow it, you want people that you know. You want something that's drawing power and selling power. So is this part of the problem? We're trying to market it and get people through the doors, that really people aren't interested in watching FC St Helens against Mossley Hill Athletic.
I think it depends who you're marketing it for as well. So I think if you're a women's football fan, like myself, I just spent the first 10 minutes absolutely loving the whole Midlands area. Someone like Gareth or yourself, who's never heard of those teams, as an example, he wouldn't potentially interest you. However, if one of those teams were playing Wolves or Forest, then obviously you might be a little bit more interested. Or if you're a men's team fan who's looking at going to your first women's team game, would you potentially be interested in going to a team that you've never heard of? Probably not. I think it's really important that people like us do actually tell the stories and show our enthusiasm and why we are enthusiastic about these teams, because they don't know the backstories, and there are backstories, there are rivalries here, even more so in this little area as opposed to men's football, for a number of reasons, and they're friendly rivalries, but there are stories to be told, and if no one's telling them stories, then they're not marketable. However, I know for a fact that some of those tier 4 games in the Midlands next year are absolutely huge, because of some backstories. If you're not from the women's side and you're from the men's side and you're trying to get men's fans across, then I saw firsthand, when you get promoted to tier 3, you know, you can play Forest, Burnley and Wolves all in the same week. If you don't market them correctly and you don't talk about them, if you don't put them in the Express and Star or go to your local radio station, you're relying very heavily on the away fans coming to you. And we saw ourselves, not many Burnley fans travel that long of a distance to come to Stourbridge. They don't. You know, if we saw it ourselves, Halifax and Hull coming to Stourbridge, they didn't travel. You know, a few did, but not many. So I think there's a lot of work to do on the marketing side. I think you've got to hit the right people, and I think you need to explain why they need to come to get anywhere near that. I'll pass over to Gareth to see what his thoughts are, but I think it completely depends on who you're marketing it towards.
I was positive with Kiddie. I said that teams had heard of them. So Gareth, you're probably going to tell me off now. But I didn't mention Wythenshawe in that list. Now you're part of Wythenshawe. For you, that's kind of, I suppose, the underdog names against some of those ones that I've mentioned. But for you guys to market is that would work. Mm-hmm. But the other way around, do you think that could be a problem?
Yeah, potentially. I think there's two ways of looking at it. I think that we definitely are looking at those names, Leeds, Huddersfield, Blackburn, as being massive games. That, you know, we're going to have a Premier League club essentially coming to play Wythenshawe. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that people outside of local women's football have never heard of Wythenshawe, because before I was involved in football, I hadn't. So, you know, I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to say at all. Yeah, we're going to market it as, look, these are big players. We're the underdogs, because we are. Let's be real. We're a promoted side. We're, you know, Huddersfield not that long ago in Tier 3. Leeds established Tier 4 side. Blackburn were in the Championship last year and should be in the Championship this year. So we are the underdogs on the pitch as well as off it. I also think there's the flip side of, if you are one of these bigger clubs, and let's say Leeds want a fixture to go at Ellen Road, and they're looking at dates and they're trying to kick some things out. The obvious one is Blackburn, great. But then I also think that you look at games and you think, we could beat Wythenshawe. Like, Wythenshawe played some good football last year, if I do say so myself. There we go, pat on the back. You think, well, that should be, hopefully that'll be a good game, a game we should win. And if that puts on a spectacle, then that's really good, because ultimately, when these clubs are putting these games into their main stadiums, they want people to come back. And the way that you bring people back is by winning games and the games being good. So I think if they can look at some of those smaller teams and think, we'll beat these, so let's play this game there, then I don't think that's necessarily beyond the realms of possibility. I think if you look at that Division 1 North at the moment, there are lots of sides in a close proximity. You've got Stockport, Cheadle, Wythenshawe, all within a stone's throw of each other. So locally, that's going to mean a lot to those fans. If we can market the Stockport game as being kind of something relatively local, then hopefully we can get some fans down. Hopefully they can travel, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think there's swings and roundabouts. I think that it's definitely easier for us to market Wythenshawe versus Leeds than it is for Leeds to market Leeds versus Wythenshawe. But at the same time, I think there are things that they'll be able to tap into that we necessarily won't necessarily be able to. You know, we don't have a big stadium that we can go, look, we're going to play in this stadium. we play at our men's ground every week. So I think there's strengths and weaknesses of it from both sides. And I think actually, looking at those tier 4 divisions this year, I think Blackburn's squad is going to look very, very different to how it looked a month ago. All of them look really competitive. I don't think I can look at any of those divisions and go, this team's going to win, this team's going to win, this team's going to win. There's teams you expect to do well and be there or thereabouts, but I think we could see lots of good title fights, lots of good relegation battles, and I think that coming into the season, we'll be thinking, it's a shame that all of this happened at the start of the season, but what a great season we've had. And if that happens, then I think it's not been worth it, because we want all those teams to be there and be committed, but it will do something to sweeten the sourness of the taste.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going to give you 2 last questions, but they are yes or no questions. You're not going to get the chance to explain it. You're just going to have to say it. So, do you think that every club should have to play at their main ground, a la Arsenal? Do you think that they should have a set number of games where they have to be able to do that, which is marketed well, to try and get people through the door? Do you think that should happen?
A limited one, because if they end up making a loss, which some of them probably will do, I think it's got to be, they've got to be careful. Obviously, it will encourage them to market it properly so they don't make a loss. But I think I would like to see either one midweek game and then one Sunday game at your local one, or an FA Cup game. But so yes.
I love how John has completely listened to the rules there. Yes or no is the answer.
I listened to the rules. I forgot until I thought about the rules. Yes.
Gaza.
No. And the reason for that is, I think, no, because people are going to come for me in the comments if I just say no. I think that it would end up being sort of half-assed a bit. People go, oh, we have to do this. It's mandatory. So let's just do it here during the international break. And it would kind of just be this thing that just happens because it has to, rather than being something special, rather than picking out kind of key games, important games. I think that's going to have a better longer-term impact if you handpick the important game of the season compared to... Yeah, I mean, you could do that anyway, but I also think, like, if you just say that, I don't know, a team that's kind of in and around a relegation battle has to play a ground, and they're going to have to then pay money for etc. I just think that there's opportunities for it to be really disappointing, and I think it should be something that is celebrated and encouraged heavily rather than enforced.
Okay. I just want to remind you, you've got a meeting at 8 there, so I was very much trying to get you lot off before this. That's taken a long time for my yes/no question. This is something that I've heard mentioned quite a bit with regards to the likes of Barnsley and all these other clubs as well. So, again, do you think that all parent clubs, I'll call them that, so, for example, if you had a Blackburn, basically the main chairman or the men's side where they have them, do you think they should be forced to allocate a percentage of their annual budget, a set percentage, a bit like NATO are trying to make us do now, a set percentage of their budget for the season to the women, even if it's like 1%, 2%, whatever it might be? Do you think they should be forced to do that?
If it's their own money, yeah, I gotta say, if it's their own money, then I think it's their choice if they want to do that or not, which I think could be hard to do. So it would be nice, but it needs to be a blanket across the board, which I don't think they would agree with. But go on, sorry, Gareth.
No, I don't agree either. I think that, I know you said yes or no, but I've warned my meeting that I might be late. I think it's just going to create a massive disparity, and what 1% of Leeds United's revenue completely outclasses everyone in that league. Now they've got Premier League TV money, and they would then just be able to buy their way through the pyramid. And I think what we would end up with is the women's pyramid would then just be a reflection of the men's pyramid, and I don't want that.
Reasonable points. So basically, to summarize, what I'm getting out of what everybody said there is that we're just in some choppy waters at the moment. It's a little bit like turbulence in the old travel to the destination. You're all off on a beautiful trip over to the Caribbean, and the takeoff has happened. Everyone was excited, and now we're just waiting. And have you ever noticed when you're on a plane, the turbulence only comes once they poured you a cup of tea that can go directly over your lap? Never before that, never after, but as soon as you've got a hot drink, well, that's game over. And that's where we are, turbulence. But the ultimate destination of the seaside of Barbados is just the other side of all that turbulence. So yes, it's a bit naff, and yes, it's a bit difficult, but ultimately we're all going to be sunbathing under the palm trees of delight as we move on. That's what I'm hearing there. So I'm going to hold you guys to it. Thank you for your time, everyone. It's been a pleasure. I'm not sure when we'll be back. I do know it's next week. Next week we are definitely back because Stu Barker is bringing us back so that we can talk through the WNL Team of the Year. So get yourself into that. Make sure you're looking at what's going on with Since 71 there, and we will be introducing the Teams of the Year from the WNL next. So make sure you're with us. We'll be here to discuss that. But until then, Destination Barbados. See you there.